Welcome, everyone. I have a wonderful, distinguished guest with me today, Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is geopolitical analyst, military analyst. Scott Ritter is author of many books. Scott Ritter is US Marine former intelligence officer and weapons inspector, chief inspector for UN. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Scott's opinion is sought after in United States and across the world. So I'm very privileged to have a few minutes with Scott. Scott, the latest developments on Nordstream. I know that you have spoken extensively on the subject. Seymour Hersh wrote an article about the involvement or potential involvement of United States and Norway. Today, there was a new article that Seymour Hersh says that he has more incriminating possibly evidence of Joe Biden's giving direct orders to destroy Nord Stream pipeline in Germany. What are your thoughts about it? And give us, what do you think should happen next? We don't hear anybody in Congress complain. Obviously, Victoria Nuland came and said that to Marco Rubio when questioned. Mr. Marco Rubio, you are as happy as I am that Nord Stream is just a pile of rubble on the bottom of the sea. With all that said, can we even have an investigation? What are your thoughts, Scott, on the entire Nord Stream and Seymour Hersh and more revelations on Biden involvement on that?
Well, I mean, Seymour Hersh has written a very important article, and I think we need to acknowledge that. His conclusions weren't shocking in that I think almost everybody knew, or at least assumed, that the United States was behind the attack. I mean, we have the President of the United States virtually confessing this. We have Victoria Nuland saying this is what she wants to do. We have Tony Blinken saying this is a wonderful opportunity for the United States. I mean, when you piece it all together, it's a very compelling circumstantial case. What Hersh's article has done is provide substance, data points that that even further condemn the United States. Three quick things. One, if Hersh's reporting is correct, Joe Biden has committed one of the most egregious violations of the Constitution imaginable. I mean, he has conspired with his own administration to bypass constitutionally mandated declarations to Congress about war. Because let's be clear, what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline was an act of war carried out by the United States together with a NATO ally, Norway, against an ostensible NATO ally and longtime friend of the United States, Germany. It was an economic Pearl Harbor. So there's just no doubting that. What is going to happen? In the United States, we see that politicians have collectively assumed the hear no evil, see no evil, say no evil approach to this. Because I think almost all of them, while they might not have been aligned with the violations of the Constitution, are happy with the outcome. They didn't want Nord Stream 2 to be up and running. People like Senator Cruz, Senator Marco Rubio, and others. Germany, though, is very unhappy. And, there's the thing about arrogance and hubris, because believe me, that's what led to this attack. It's the arrogance of the United States, the hubris of the United States, that we can do these things because we are the world's sole remaining superpower. The world must revolve around America. Everything is about America. America first, America only, to the exclusion of all else. We attacked a $12 billion piece of vital energy infrastructure that didn't belong to us. And, while some of it was, in fact, owned by Russia, Gazprom, much of it was owned by Europe, Germany, and a consortium of European nations, all of whom we portend to call friend. In Germany, there is silence, or there was silence in the aftermath, because I don't think Germany could quite comprehend the ramifications. You remember the reporter when Joe Biden on February 7th said that Nord Stream would come to an end. The reporter was like, well, how would you do that? This is
how are you going to do it? Yes.
Yeah. And he said, don't worry, it'll be done. And I think Germany initially was like, what happened? You wouldn't really have attacked us, would you? The answer is yes. And Hersh's article, notice he wrote the article And the first major interview he has given about the article was to a German outlet, which means Cy knows where the pressure point is for this story. It's in Germany, and the story's starting to gain resonance. It's traction. And here's the important thing, and unintended consequences is something that everybody should keep in mind when you carry out bold actions, especially bold criminal actions like Joe Biden ordered against Nordstream 2. If Germany comes to a collective understanding that the United States attacked it, that's it for U.S.-German relations. That might be it for Germany being a member of NATO. It will forever alter the relationship between Germany and the United States. The United States will no longer be viewed as a friend, but an enemy, somebody who attacked them, who carried out the economic equivalent of Pearl Harbor, deliberately damaging the German economy, destroying jobs, closing down factories, making people suffer. That's not the action of a friend, that's the action of an enemy. And so in Germany right now, you're starting to see more and more members of parliament raising their hands and asking the difficult questions. And these questions are, in large part, empowered by Seymour Hersh's outstanding reporting. And if Seymour Hersh has a second wave of reporting, it might be the stake through the vampire's heart, with the United States being the vampire. But now there's a third aspect to this story that's just now starting to be appreciated. The United States claims that Russia launched an unprovoked act of aggression against Ukraine. And that justifies somehow the actions we're taking vis-a-vis Nordstream. The United States today talks about the need for negotiated settlement. Why won't Russia negotiate? Why won't Russia? Well, if you take a look at the timeline, Russia was doing nothing but demanding negotiated settlement. The Minsk Accords, Russia was pursuing these prior to the decision to invade. It wasn't Russia that shut down the Minsk Accords. It was Ukraine. It was France and Germany. And we now know why. Former President Poroshenko, former Chancellor Merkel, former French President Hollande, all admit that it was a sham, a lie. All they wanted to do is buy time to build up a Ukrainian military. The Russian attack that took place on February 24th wasn't designed to capture Kiev, or it was a campaign designed to get Ukraine to the negotiating table, which they did 3 times in early March, and they were able to come very close to finalizing a negotiated peace of settlement that could have been signed on 1 April in Istanbul. But Boris Johnson came in, ordered by the United States, to shut it down. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why? Because normally one would say, well, it's because the United States was ready to provide billions of dollars worth of equipment to Ukraine. But that didn't happen until May and June. This shutting down took place in late March, early April. Why? Because the United States hadn't blown up Nordstream 2 pipeline is the answer. That had to be done. There could be no termination of this conflict until that pipeline was destroyed. And so now, who is the United States at war with? Is the United States at war with Russia? If it was, they could have had a negotiated settlement. They didn't need to blow up the pipeline. The United States is at war with Germany. That this conflict isn't just about weakening Russia. It's about weakening Germany and weakening the European Union. And so now Europeans, wake up. Your enemy was never Russia. Russia never posed a threat to you. The enemy was the wolf you allowed into the lambs, the flock of sheep. And the wolf is now eating you one by one by one. And but it's disguised as a sheep, and your shepherd is the same person who put the wolf in there. The United States is the enemy of everybody. And that's the biggest part of this story, that the United States, unfortunately, has morphed into a nation worthy of the mantle of evil, because we are evil. When you support wars without justification, wars that kill hundreds of thousands of people, displace millions, you are evil. And the Biden administration is evil, criminal. Congress is not doing anything about it, which certifies the entire American government is evil, and the American people continue to be deaf, dumb, and blind, which makes us complicit in the crime. Therefore, we are, by extension, evil. I don't like this. I love my country, but you got to call a spade a spade. And right now, the United States, based upon what we did against Nordstream, is an evil nation.
Thank you, Scott. What do you think Germany should do or could do? And what should or would happen to Biden? I mean, if would there be investigation? I mean, obviously, Congress is not interested, it seems, in Nord Stream or bringing Biden to question him or nothing of the sort. And what could Germany do? I mean, is there going to be any type of justice in this situation? And what do you think would have happened if Trump was the president of the United States? Would the same things happen? Because Donald Trump also told Merkel way back when something about that you shouldn't have that Nord Stream. So it seems like both Democrats and Republicans agreed on the notion that, and my understanding, Trump said something about it's not fair that we support Germany and Germany is going to be economically tied to Russia while we are supporting Germany, something along those lines. So what should Germany do? What should happen to Biden, if anything? And do you think it would be different if Trump was the president? Would this happen?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. Look, Donald Trump came into office claiming that he wanted to be friends with Russia. What's wrong with being friends with Russia, he asked. And yet, by the time his term ended, he was bragging about he was the toughest president ever against Russia, that I have imposed more sanctions, da-da-da. So I don't believe anything would have been different under Trump. If anything, things would have been worse, because I personally believe that while Trump might have some interesting notions in his head, he had no clue how to manifest them in terms of the American governmental bureaucracy. He was incompetent as a president. I think as bad as things are, at least Joe Biden knows the system, knows how to make the system work. So there's a modicum of evil professionalism taking place. Donald Trump was not a professional politician. He didn't know anything about managing this nation. And on a crisis like this, he could actually have made things worse, because his default mode is bluster, to threaten. And I think what we're learning right now is that Russia doesn't threaten, doesn't receive threats very well. So I don't think this would have been different. It could have been worse. What can Germany do? Well, act like a sovereign state is what Germany can do. And what happens when a sovereign state, I mean, the answer answers itself. What can Germany do? Once you set down the foundation, behave as a sovereign state, when a sovereign state is attacked in an unprovoked manner like the United States did, the answer becomes self-evident. Now, if you don't want to go to war, at least sever diplomatic relations. Don't tolerate the continued presence of the armed forces of a hostile nation on your territory. Evict them, evict the ambassador, sever all relations with the United States, and then start putting pressure on Europe. Because understand this, Germany continues to be the most important nation in Europe. It's the largest, most powerful, influential economy. Germany can take down all of Europe right now by simply saying, we're going back to the Deutschmark. Good luck with the euro. And when that happens, the euro crashes, the Deutschmark goes up, and Germany's large and in charge. So Germany's holding a lot of cards right now. And these cards could be even further enhanced if Germany did the right thing vis-a-vis Ukraine and said, not only will we not continue to supply military equipment, but we will oppose the Ukrainian position. We recognize the Russian position, and then work with Russia to reestablish the important economic ties. And then Germany transition over to the Trans-Eurasian Economic Union. There's a lot that Germany can do. Will they do it? No, because when you've been trained to be a compliant poodle of the United States for so long, it's very difficult to break out of that training. And right now, Germany is simply a nation too scared of its own shadow to actually step out and be a real nation. It's a fake nation. It's a colony of the United States. And until it learns how to understand what the term sovereign nation means, it will behave as a colonial nation subordinated to its colonial master, the United States.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, what do you think about Chinese balloon scare and the aliens? Remember how the U.S. Air Force general answering the question from reporter, what was the fourth unidentified object that they just recently shot over Lake Huron, said, oh, I can't comment whether it was, extraterrestrial or not. As the reporter asked, I would like to have intelligence community answer that. Since you are our intelligence community, Scott, do we have aliens out there? I mean, what are they trying to bait us into, some kind of alien invasion to distract us from the hearings on Joe Biden's son in Congress and Twitter files suppression of free speech? What do you think is going on with these unidentified objects? An intelligence community is supposed to investigate whether it's extraterrestrial, otherwise we can't comment on it. What is going on?
Well, what's going on is this is a massive campaign of distraction, as you noted. The last thing the Biden administration wants is for the American people to be focused on what's going on in Ukraine, because what's happening in Ukraine now is that the Russian military is getting ready to swamp the Ukrainians. This is not going to be pretty for Ukraine going forward. And many questions are being asked. For instance, yesterday at the Ramstein contact group, it was supposed to be a meeting where the world was going to come together and give Ukraine all the ammunition that it needed. And what came out of that is, we don't have any ammunition to give you, and we're unable to make any ammunition. You're going to lose this war. Now, they're not saying that. I mean, every time Ukraine is losing the war, when General Mark Milley comes out and says that Russia is losing the war, because that's the way Americans work. We lie about everything. So when Mark Milley comes out and says Russia's losing, Russia's suffering immense casualties, why would he have to lie about that? Because Ukraine's suffering immense casualties. So you mirror the reality of Ukraine onto Russia. The fact is, there's nothing NATO can do to help Ukraine turn the tide on the battlefield. This is going to be a horrific defeat for Ukraine and an embarrassing defeat for NATO and the United States. And the last thing the Biden administration wants anybody to do right now is start asking questions about that. So, hey, boom, balloon problem. It's not the first time balloons have come over the United States. And I will say this, I will bet you a dime to a dollar that we knew all about that Chinese balloon. I knew about that Chinese balloon. I know what the experiments China's running. I know the sensor package up there because the Chinese have said what it is. It's a civilian sensor package designed for high altitude, data collection about, water particles and things like that relate to climate change. The Chinese are very concerned about glacier melting in the Tibetan Plateau. And so they've been putting up tethered balloons there for many years using the same sensor suite. Google it, you'll see it. And we know what that does. But now, because you're dealing with climate, it's global climate. So you can't just deal with what's going on above the Tibetan Plateau. You have to understand why, weather patterns come into the Tibetan Plateau, how it's influenced around the world, and where it originates. So you send balloons out to collect the data around the globe so you can get this comprehensive picture. And we know it because we support it, because it's part of climate change research. We knew this, but no, we have to distract. Oh, look, a balloon. We got to shoot it down. Really? You don't need to shoot it down, but we did shoot it down. We turned it into a crisis. And now we've had the North American air defense system fine-tune its radar, so it's detecting everything else that we're now shooting down. What gets me is we had to waste, about $1 million taking down one of these balloons, which, might cost $20,000. They said we had to do it for national security, but it wasn't national security. We had to do it to protect airliners, you see, because airliners fly up and they could run into these balloons. But when was the last time you heard about an American airliner hitting a balloon and crashing? You haven't, because it doesn't happen. So this isn't, national security. This has been going on forever. It's not a threat, but we have to distract. We have to create a crisis mode. We have to get people to stop talking about Russia and start talking about China. And so we do that with this, basically another lie. Again, I just go down to, this is the most basic advice I can provide anybody. Whenever a U.S. government official speaks, they are lying. Their job is not to tell you the truth. Their job is to shape your perception. And they will shape your perception by throwing the information to you that they need you to focus on, so that you're not asking the real questions about what's really going on.
I think you also wrote an article for RT the other day. I read it. It said something about when the American government speaks, it lies. talking about the anthrax little vial that was shaken there and presented as a reason for us to go to another war. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that explanation. Really quickly here, I watched an interview with you, and I thought it was profound when you spoke about that you took an oath as a Marine to not to the government, but to the Constitution. And I wanted to follow up with a question on that. Remember, you said that when there was a war in Iraq, and the interviewer asked you, how do you take the orders if you know that they're unconstitutional? So my question is, how does American military and the soldier, if they know or feel in their heart that the government lies, I think that was also mentioned in that interview with you, and then he receives an order, is he supposed to abide by the order, even though he knows, like you intelligence officer, you know when government lies, when it doesn't? How would the soldier then react if the soldier knows he took the oath to the Constitution and he feels that this order is unconstitutional? What does the soldier supposed to do?
Well, military personnel have been trained to respect international humanitarian law. And there are certain givens in this that we don't attack civilians. We don't bomb hospitals. We don't torture people. We don't murder prisoners of war. We don't abuse prisoners of war. And so if somebody gives us an order and we assess the order and we say, this is going to require me to attack a protected civilian area, then you are obligated by your oath to refuse that order. You cannot legally execute an unlawful order, and an unlawful order is defined by an order that violates the Constitution or violates international humanitarian law that has been adopted by the United States as such. But here's the thing. Our job is to obey the lawful orders of those appointed above us. And in the military, the tip of the triangle at the top there, the apex, is civilian leadership. There is a mechanism in the United States for legal review. In all command staffs, especially 4-star command staffs, there is a legal advisor, and that legal advisor reviews instructions given, for instance, by the civilian authority to a combatant commander to execute an operation. Before that order is given, there's an attorney general that's also reviewing these orders for constitutionality. So as long as you have checks and balances in place where, duly mandated legal authority is reviewing orders for their constitutionality, and it's passed through the appropriate wickets, I'm not, as a combatant, a junior officer, I'm not a duly mandated legal review authority. I have been trained on very narrow windows that are black and white when it comes to international humanitarian law. But if I'm given the order to cross the line of departure and go into Iraq, I don't get to say that's an unconstitutional order, because people above me have already reviewed that order and deemed it to be constitutional. Okay. But I can't, if someone says, kill that prisoner. No, see, that I can't do. That is a clearly unconstitutional war. But the act of going to war, I have to obey that order. I don't have the latitude to say, no, this is an unconstitutional order, because I'm not mandated to do that. And frankly speaking, I'm not equipped to do that. I am either an intelligence officer or I'm a company commander. I have my job to do. I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I don't have the ability or the right to say, I'm going to subject that order to independent constitutional scrutiny carried out by me. That's worthless. That has been done by the people above me. And this is where faith in the chain of command, this is where integrity comes into play, that I have to assume that somebody above me has executed that order. Now, if I'm in a unique situation where out of the blue, I'm ordered to do something. Like, let's just say that it's peacetime and I get an order, Ritter, invade that embassy. I'd say, on whose authority? They'd say, from the President of the United States. I'd say, I need to see that written order. See, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to say, I need to see that written order. I am not going to do this based upon your word and your word alone. I need to see the written order. And then when you get the written order, you're allowed to say, and I need to see the legal review. And you can seek that in a very unique situation. But generally speaking, no, we don't have the responsibility or the duty to say, time out, boss, I need to see the written order. Because by the time I said that, all my men are dead because I haven't executed the orders that I'm supposed to execute. So it's a, it's a complicated thing. The military's job is to fight wars, but fight wars in accordance with the laws of the United States. We take an oath to defend the Constitution, but part of that is faith in the system to ensure that the orders given to us are constitutional in nature. If things are obviously unconstitutional or obviously illegal, then we are duty bound to refuse those orders.
Thank you, Scott. And one last question real quick. I would like to ask you some more questions, but we'll be respectful of your time today. When you were Chief Weapons Inspector in UN, you took an oath there too. And I remember in one of your interviews, you see, there is a person who watches Scott's interviews here. You said that when you took an oath to serve in the UN, you told your American counterparts that once I take that oath, don't come and do the wink, wink to me that do something that we want versus what's in the UN's charter. How does it work? I mean, when you work for UN, do you still have their oath? Is it different, or do you have both American oath and UN oath that you and how does American government then comes in and says, hey, Scott, we need you to find these weapons over there, and like, what do you do? I mean, I know you had a nice story about it. Can you quickly elaborate how does that work? How did it work for you?
First of all, understand that there's no oath to the United Nations.
Okay.
The United Nations is an organization of sovereign member states. And so people who work for the United Nations are citizens of their state. And so the United Nations cannot ask you to do something that violates the sovereignty of, frankly, any state unless there's a Security Council resolution. So it's not about being loyal to the United Nations. It's about adhering to the United Nations Charter, which in the case of the United States, because the Constitution says that any treaty that has been ratified by 2/3 of the United States Senate becomes the law of the land. So the United Nations Charter, having been ratified by the United States Senate, is a continuation of constitutional duty. But I don't take an oath to that. I take an oath to the United States to uphold and defend. You do sign, various non-disclosure agreements, and you do sign agreements that say that you will act to the general good of the United Nations, but these are non-binding. The United Nations has never successfully prosecuted anybody for violating these because the United Nations is not a state. It's not a sovereign entity. It is a organization. But the United States government, as part of the Security Council, passed a resolution 687 in April of 1991 that created the Special Commission, the inspectors, and mandated our work in Iraq. By the time I came in, it was September, and we knew right now that we are in there's a couple things that were obvious. One, that the Iraqis were lying through their teeth, and we were entering a stage of confrontation. And two, that the United States never intended to let the system work the way it was supposed to. We have James Baker, the Secretary of State, saying in May that it doesn't matter if Iraq gives up all of its weapons, we will never lift sanctions. And as a UN inspector, the only thing that gives us any legitimacy is that quid pro quo, to go to the Iraqis and say, give up your weapons, and then we lift the sanctions. But if we come in and say, give up your weapons, but you're never going to get sanctions lifted, they're going to say, then why should we give up our weapons? That's the outcome. So there was this thing going on. And what I've said, a lot of people today christen me as a knight in shining armor. as God's gift to perfection and integrity. And I believe I operate with a extremely high level of integrity. But I live in the real world. And, you know, my loyalty is to the United States of America, not Saddam Hussein, and not at that time Boutros Ghali. And so I was brought into a situation where I'm looking around going, this is confusing. This is very confusing what's going on. I'm being asked to create an intelligence organization that's never been created in the history of the United Nations to go into Iraq and carry out actions that are normally only done with the authority of a sovereign state. But now I'm doing it on behalf of the United Nations. And I have to be careful because what I'm being asked to do could be used for other purposes. And then I'm violating not the oath, but I'm violating the commitment I have made to implement Resolution 687 faithfully. So I went down to Washington, D.C., and I met with a panel of people from the CIA, State Department, Department of Defense, et cetera. And I said, you got to be straight with me, guys. Is there something going on that I need to be aware of? And if so, what would I be required to do? I need to know up front. I need to define what my expectations are so I can decide whether or not I want to be part of this. So, you know, I'm a loyal American. If you're going to tell me right now, hey, 687, we want you to go in there and we need you to do this, that, and the other thing, I would have pulled back and said, do I want to do that? And do you want to know what the answer would have been? Yes, I would have done it because I'm an American. And my government is telling me that's what they need me to do. I have no loyalty to the United Nations. I have none. I am loyal only to my country. But so I put that out there, but they told me, no, your orders as an American is to faithfully implement Resolution 687. Faithfully implement Resolution 687. And that's the orders from my government to me. And now I have received a direct order from a constitutionally mandated authority to me as an American citizen. And now I'm going to execute that order. And there ain't no wink, wink, nod, nod clause. So again, because I am a man of honor, I'm not perfect. I told you, had they told me to be the spy, I would have been the best spy you ever saw. But they told me to faithfully implement that. That became my duty. That became my job. But then almost immediately, I clashed with the CIA, who 1 minute's telling me, no, faithfully execute your mandate. But then on the other one, they're going, hey, yeah, we're going to come in and we're going to do this. And I'm like, no, you're not. Not under my watch, because that isn't related to the resolution. And so I was at war for 7 years, not only against the Iraqis, who viewed me as an overly aggressive son of a gun. They called me Abu Azamat, the father of all crises, because every time I led an inspection team in, there was a world crisis that led to the Security Council meeting and demanding to bomb and all this stuff. So I literally was the father of all crises. The Iraqis, they respected me because I never lied to them, but they didn't like me. But while I'm doing this job, and it's a tough job, I mean, on 3 occasions, they tried to kill me. On several occasions, they put guns to my head. They threatened to kill me and my inspectors. And so every time I led a team in, we didn't know. I mean, we literally prepared to be for being taken hostage. Imagine that, leading an inspection team of guys with no guns, with families, and telling them, trust me, guys, I'm going to get you through this. But we're going in there, and a couple of you guys have little beacons I've given you. And if we're taking hostage, people cluster around the beacon dudes because Delta Force is going to be coming in, and they're going to kill everything and grab you and get out. And they're all like, what? You know, I work in a laboratory. I got a very thin neck. I got a very thin arm. I got pale skin. I'm not made to be rescue material for Delta Force. I don't want to be in your Chuck Norris movie. But then you have to say, this is what we have to do because we have to confront the Iraqis to get this done. And the Iraqis, they're like sharks on blood. You know, if a shark senses blood, they swarm and they eat. Fear is the blood. If you go in there and you demonstrate any fear, they swarm, they intimidate you, and the team is ruined. I watched too many inspection teams get intimidated by the Iraqis and lose their ability. So I went in hard every time, right in their face. And this is very tough because you have to trust the people not only with you, but behind you. And the people behind me were the U.S. government, including the CIA that was at war with me. They didn't like what I was doing, you see, because if I successfully accomplished my mission, then we would have disarmed Iraq, and then we have to lift the sanctions that the U.S. didn't want lifted. So I was only supposed to pretend to be a good inspector. I wasn't supposed to be a good inspector. And the better I got, the more they had to destroy me. The CIA ordered the FBI to investigate me on numerous occasions. So when I'd come home from Iraq after having a gun put to my head, I come home and I got the FBI threatening to sweep me off the street and haul me in and treat me, incommunicado. I can't call my family. They never did it, but they were threatening that the whole time. We're going to pull you off the street, Ritter. We're investigating you for espionage. We're investigating you for this. Espionage, everything I do is known by the CIA. I didn't do anything that wasn't known by the CIA. I coordinated closely with the CIA, but there were parts of the CIA that didn't like this. So the FBI is going after me. It's just war. I'm being undermined. I went to Jordan and seized some gyros. I mean, we did a lot of really cool stuff. The Israelis gave us some really good intelligence about gyroscopes, missile gyroscopes coming out of Russia through Jordan into Iraq covertly. And so I took that intelligence, went to Jordan, met with the king's advisor, and I got the Jordanians to raid the warehouse that night. And we seized all of these gyros. And it was a great success. So I wanted to take some of these gyros so that we could get them. Remember, there's a thing called chain of custody. So
yes,
I got a chain of custody so that the findings are legitimate, so that nobody inserted anything there. So I'm establishing a chain of custody with the Jordanians to get the seized materials brought out to a laboratory known by the United Nations to evaluate it, to determine if the technical specifications of the gyroscopes exceeded those set for limitations by the Security Council resolution. My job. What did the CIA do? As soon as I left, they came in and said, don't trust him. He's an Israeli spy. Give us all the gyros and never work with him again. So now we're calling up the Jordanians saying, hey, ready to work? And they're like, well, we don't want to work with you anymore because you're apparently a bad guy. The CIA came in and stole everything. And suddenly the CIA comes in with its own assessment. And I'm like, well, we can't use this. Why not? This is America. I said, you're not the United Nations. I had a chain of custody thing going on. You came in and violated the chain of custody. I can't trust you because I wasn't there. I wasn't there when you did your evaluation. I didn't have somebody there signing off on the seals on the bags to make sure the stuff, that's just, I was at war the entire time with the United States, and it was draining because I'm at war at home when I'm supposed to be preparing for the inspection. Then I go on the inspection. I'm at war with the Iraqis, but I got the CIA attacking me from behind, and that's just the way it was. But the one thing I'm proud of, and I'll leave it with this, when I resigned from the Special Commission, I think the Iraqis were relieved because I was literally a troublemaker for them. But they knew that I was an honest guy. And one reason why they knew that, in March of 1998, I led an inspection team in to inspect the Ministry of Defense building. This was a building that Tariq Aziz, then the Deputy Prime Minister, said that if you inspect the Ministry of Defense, it's war. We will never let you in. And yet, because in January, I had been blocked by the Iraqis, they created a crisis. Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, intervened, and they created these modalities of inspection, which were supposed to be an agreement that allowed people like me to gain access to sensitive sites. So now the United States wants to test these modalities. So who better to test them than the father of all crises? And so they're going to send me in with this team, and we're going to be very aggressive. And I have no problem being very aggressive in implementing the agreed upon modalities. But the United States at the last second slips in the Ministry of Defense building. And we're all like, dude, that's war. And they're like, yeah, but if the Iraqis are serious about this agreement, they'll have to let you in. We're like, they ain't going to let us in. And my suspicions were confirmed when I met in the final meeting before leaving to Bahrain and then on to Iraq, where my own boss, Richard Butler, who had met with Madeleine Albright and the White House and got the secret orders, admits in front of everybody. He draws a whiteboard, and Bill Richardson, the U.S. ambassador, is there. Charles Dulfer, the deputy's there. Peter, somebody who's there, and the CIA guy's there. And he draws it on the board and he says, okay, Ritter, we need you to go into Iraq on this day, and you have to inspect the Ministry of Defense on this day because we need to have a crisis then, and we can begin bombing here. So he was tied to Ramadan. We had to have a week's worth of bombing before Ramadan so we didn't upset the Muslims. I mean, it's kind of stupidity. So it's all on a tight schedule. And I went, boss, my job isn't to start a war. Don't worry about it, Scott. You just go and do your inspection. I said, okay, I will go and do my inspection. So off I went. Now, there's a long story about how they tried to stop me. Madeleine Albright didn't want me on that team. The CIA guy actually fought for me, and Bill Clinton, the president, intervened to keep me on the team. So now I'm on the team. Madeleine Albright's in Paris, sitting next to her French counterpart, almost just dying, giddy. And she's like, oh, man, something's going to happen. Points to her watch. Cruise missiles are going to be hitting Iraq pretty soon. The guy's like, how do you know? We got an inspection team in there, and the fix is in. The fix is in. Yeah, the fix is in. It's going to happen. Well, the fix wasn't in, you see, because I didn't work for the United States government. I was told by the U.S. government to faithfully implement Security Council Resolution 687. So when I showed up at the site, Amr Rashid, the Minister of Oil and one of their former head weapons master director, comes in. He says, you're not allowed in here. I said, I got to come in. You can't come in. I said, okay, you do know what happens if you kick me out. If the second I leave, the missiles come in, you're dead, they're dead, everybody's dead. And I said, so that, and he's like, well, yeah, but you're going to violate our sovereignty. I said, I'm not here to violate your sovereignty. You know me. I've been to every sensitive site in Iraq, and I've always done the right thing. You've never once accused me of spying. I know you've accused other people of, but not me. And he's chewing on it. And I said, look, you got to let me in on my terms. You don't get to dictate terms. That's not how this works. I get to go in with the number of people I want to do what I want to do, because that's what the law says. And they bounced it up to Tariq Aziz. They bounced it up to Saddam Hussein. We intercepted all the communications. We know what they were saying. And finally, they came back and they said, okay, you get to go in. But they were looking at me like, we're watching you. I led my team in, and we spent, I think, over 8 hours inspecting that building. In a very intrusive inspection. Imagine letting a team of Iraqis into the Pentagon, into the Secretary of Defense's office, into the Joint Operations Center with the maps on the board. That's how sensitive it was. And I'm leading the team in there, and we're doing this. Yeah. But I told my team, we're not here to spy. I don't want any of this. So we're looking for very specific things. And after 8 hours, we came to the conclusion that none of the things we were looking for were there, and we withdrew. And Madeleine Albright was so angry, so furious that I had not given her her war. Sandy Berger, the national security advisor, went from 1 second saying that I'm, like Darth Vader, the guy that goes in and cause trouble. Then I became overnight the greatest threat to American national security. For what? For being a man of integrity and doing my job. Some people out there would say, well, Scott, come on, man, you should have played the game. No, I don't play games. I do my job. If you want me to do a job, you have to tell me what the job is. And they told me the job was 687, faithfully executed. But the Iraqis at that point trusted me, and they didn't like me, but they trusted me. And in 2002, when I was trying to stop the war, to build up the war, I approached Tariq Aziz and said, I need to come to Iraq, and I need to address your parliament. He said, why would we let no foreigners ever spoken to our parliament? And I said, well, I am. He said, why? I said, because I have to convince them that letting weapons inspectors back in is a good idea. And he said, it's not a good idea. I said, it is a good idea, because if you don't, you're all going to die. We're going to invade. The only way to stop the invasion is to let the inspectors back in. And they thought about it, and they let me in. And I got to do the speech. Nobody censored my speech. Historic speech. I don't get any credit for this, but I went in there and gave a speech. I was reviled in the United States as Saddam's shill, a traitor. And from that speech, I actually then got to talk to the foreign minister, the deputy prime minister, the vice president, and anybody who knows what's going on in Iraq at the time. Taha Yassin Ramadan was actually running Iraq while Saddam Hussein was writing love poems. So I got to speak to the most powerful man in Iraq, and I won them over. And they let inspectors back in. So there was a wonderful brief opportunity where inspectors had a chance to stop a war, but the United States wasn't going to let them. But that's a different thing. But my point is, the Iraqis trusted me so much that they let me speak to their parliament without anybody censoring without anybody knowing what I was going to say, with live TV cameras. I was being broadcast to the world. And that's trust. And that trust isn't given, it's earned. And I earned it by 7 years of strict adherence to Resolution 687. The irony is, I earned the trust of the Iraqi government, and I earned the hatred of my own government. That's the way it goes.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's an excellent answer. I have so many more questions, but we'll do it the next time.
We'll do it another time. I appreciate being to understand. It's just today's a busy day.
I understand perfectly. And I want to thank everybody who is watching me and Scott, and hopefully will join us the next time. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.